Welcome to Percussion Perspectives, a podcast by Henrik Knapper Larsen and Håkon Steine. Each episode of Percussion Perspectives features one or more musical artists in conversation about musical education, practice, and aesthetic and sociological perspectives.
In June 2021, we met with German percussionist and educator Christian Dierstein in the beautiful surroundings of his hometown, Freiburg. Since the 1990s, Christian has been one of the most active and influential percussionists in contemporary music, as a member of ensembles such as Ensemble Recherche, Trio Accanto, and as a soloist and commissioner of a large body of works, and not least as a professor of percussion at the Basel Academy of Music, which houses one of the best percussion classes in Europe in the field of experimental and contemporary music. Christian has performed in countless halls and festivals all over the world and has collaborated with some of the most significant composers of our time. In our chat, Christian talks about his multi-faceted education, how he tried to get inspired rather than confused by all the different inputs he was exposed to, how he managed to find his own voice as a performing artist, and what keeps him inspired today, 35 years into his career. Okay, so today I am speaking to percussionist Christian Dierstein, and I'm here in his studio in the Ensemble House in Freiburg. And so Christian, it's a pleasure to have you on the podcast. We know each other for quite a long time, and it's a pleasure talking to you. So, the first thing I wondered, if you could tell us a little bit about how you started music and percussion and how you got into building your career, which, from my understanding, is threefold. You have a solo career, a chamber music career with Ensemble Recherche, and one with the Trio Accanto, and also as a teacher and professor in Basel, of course. And maybe you do more things like composing or improvising or cooking.
Improvising, yes.
Yes, improvising. Yeah. And then I know you also had a passion for Iranian zarb drumming.
Yeah.
So, you're a hardworking guy. Always latest in bed, always first up in the morning and the Darmstadt courses. And just give us an insight in how it all started for you.
How it all started then? Well, we have to go a bit back. There's a small history. I come from Freiburg. Here, that's my hometown. I grew up in a small village nearby. So Freiburg was the big city, which is not at all true, but at this time it was the big city. And I often went with my grandfather to the symphony concerts here in the town hall. And it was a theater orchestra, which is let us say in German, it's a B orchestra. So it's okay. And surely as we had places quite up very high in the theater. And so from time to time somebody stood up behind and he played the cymbals. And it was so amazing for me, just this ceremony, taking up these cymbals and playing them. And then it was a big boom and the whole orchestra played loud because he wanted to play loud. And I thought, wow, that's the job. Yeah, they all wait that he's playing the cymbals. So I said to my grandfather and to my mom, I want to have lessons I want to be like him. So, and the nice story is then that my mother, then she phoned at the theater and she asked, who's this man? And they said, yeah, it's Mr. Pung. So it was Hans Pung, who was the first percussion player in the orchestra. At this point, I didn't know that he was an alcoholic and that he had really quite a lot of problems in family. And so, but I started with him at the age of 6, I remember. Then I always went into the town and I was quite afraid of all these cars because I came from this small village just outside a bit in the Black Forest. And I went there and I went to so this was, let us say, it was 72, 73 or 71, I don't know, this time. I went there and it was in the basement. It was a small room with drum set. And he was smoking the whole time. Really incredible nowadays. He was smoking the whole time. He was not telling very much things. And he had there his 2 days of teaching. And it was clear it was in between his working sessions in the theater. to tell the truth, he was a super frustrated percussion player, and he always said to me, if you want to get percussion player, you have to murder another one because you won't get a job. So in a way, it was quite frustrating to start, but I had this in mind that I want to be a percussion player. It was not clear if this should be in an orchestra or in a rock band. Surely afterwards we created our rock band with 11, 12. We had it was called Black Point, the band, and we were 2 players, a guitar player and the drums, and we played over the high. My mother, this was for me really the challenge, that my mother was a teacher, school teacher, music teacher in school, so I always had the key for the school, so we could always work there. So this means we did there our rehearsals in the music rooms, and surely we crashed the hi-fi amplifier stereo because we were just too loud or we didn't take care or however. So we had a lot of these small problems what you have. And to say, I went there every week to this drummer, and we from the theater, Mr. Pung, and he taught me with a Russian school, because I think he came from the East. And it was really the 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, and it was just super boring. But I thought I'll be Ringo Starr, so I just have to do this. So I did this for 3 years or something like that. And then he was thrown out of the school. I don't know what happened. I don't know what happened. And then another guy came, and he was very friendly, very good. Maybe not the best drummer, but very motivated. And there I started to play more drums and this was good. And then after a while, because I came quite from a more classical family, so they were all quite thinking that it's nice to play drum set, but the real music is classical music. So when I was then 14, 15, then I started to play in some amateur orchestras, symphonic amateur orchestras. I started to play that timpani, so I took some other lessons with timpani with Mr. Pung again. And then I started to, because my mother always thought, yeah, but it's nice, but there's a Musikhochschule, so there's really this academic way. So she got me close to our both teacher, to Bernhard Wolf. And Bernhard Wolf, he thought, yeah, why not? Okay, I think he was just, my mother had a good talk with him, and so he said, yeah, okay, she should pass by. I did an exam, and then suddenly I was in the Hochschule. And then I remember the first project was Stravinsky. It was not Sacré du Printemps, but it was Feuervogel, Firebird. And I remember there was 15, 16. I came there to the first rehearsal. It was only percussion players.
This is the late 70s now?
It's the late 70s. Yeah, this should have been, 79, 80s.
Which means, so Bernhard started the school in 73 or 74, so he was still in his 20s, more or less.
Yeah, he had a young class, very, let us say, very... So Steven Schick was there, Andreas Böttger was there, Pete Klinkenberg was there, Gregory Jones was there. So not Gregory Jones, Gregory Riffel was there, Olaf Chopper. So there were quite some people, which was super interesting. Also, I remember very much at this point. I thought, what is this strange piece everybody is working on? Everybody was working on Cyclus. Andreas Böttger, he was working over years. He had one room where he just worked Cyclus, and nobody was allowed to take out anything. So no guiro, no cymbal. It was just his room, and he was working super hard on Cyclus. And I thought it must be really frustrating to do this work. So in a way, it was not my thing, I think. And surely this was a time also, Rumi Ogawa-Helferich, she was there. So she played together with Robin Tchaikovsky at this time. They were passing people. It was, and you had
Klaus Huber teaching composition, Brian Ferneyhough teaching composition.
Absolutely.
So there was a really high profile.
Absolutely high profile. It was really so. In a way, it was super interesting. Really, Nunes was also there.
Kai Sadeau, maybe.
Yeah, also there were quite a lot of people passing by. Cornelius Schwer was already there. Johannes Schöllhorn was there. So it was an interesting time, but in a way it was for me a bit too academic. So in a way, I had always at the same times I had jazz lessons with a quite good Rolf Kichlin. He's called a very good jazz drummer. He played a lot here. He was touring with Michel Sagmeister, and really a good, very groovy guy. And he was relaxed. He was cool. So in a way, this was more my way. And in a way, this academic world at this moment was for me not so interesting. So this means when. Then I was very much in the political scene, I have to say, with 16 to 18. So I wasn't in music. I always passed by. I was working a bit, but I was working there, marimba, Telemann, and I was working the William Kraft suite and things like this. It was interesting. I was also a bit in new music. It was interesting, but there was maybe one or two moments. This was one when Jean-Pierre Drouet, he passed by, he did a solo concert. He was invited by André Richard, who was at this point the director of the New Music Institute. And there suddenly I felt something. I thought, wow, what is he's doing? He was talking and he was acting and he was just, there was a spirit. I thought, wow, here happened something. This is really interesting. But in a way, then after 2 days, he went away and the workshop was away. Okay, in a way, I forgot. So I went afterwards. I thought I want to be jazz drummer. So this means after the my school time, I went to Paris. I didn't want to go to the States because politically at this point it was just a regular area and it was just out to go to the States. It was in a way, now you should not go there. It was just no capitalism. So I thought I'd go to Paris. And I did there a school. It was a jazz school. I did 2 jazz schools. One was a bit more freer, more in the free jazz direction. It was interesting, but there was nobody was really teaching there. So on the other hand, I went to this Agostini school, Dante Agostini school, which was at this time one of the books as a drummer you should do. And so you can imagine we were in a very small room, 4 or 5 drum set players playing, then 1, 2, solo of Max Roach. Okay, you did the Max Roach solo, then Alvin Jones solo. You were all reading. It was super boring, super fast, but I had no perspective with this. It was just not really interesting. It was like in a fabric. You just learned how to.
Was it in a way a style study of the great American jazz drummers
Absolutely.
that he notated and kind of made academic in
Absolutely.
a way? So that's
Absolutely.
the kind of approach.
And there was nobody who was really there where you were really fascinated. The teacher, he was good, but it was not interesting. There was no person who fascinated me. So in a way, I did it, and I was working on it. I was living there in Paris with really no money. I was living in a squat, and I had my drum set with me. I was working, but I was a bit lost, I have to say. And then I was in a concert in the Centre Pompidou, and Jean-Pierre Drouet, he played again there. He played together a solo concert with Carlos Alsina Roca, who was the piano player and composer. He did a nice solo piece, Themen. It's not very much played. It's also a big setup. Not very much played. An Argentinian piano player and composer. So they did a duo concert, and I don't know what Drouet, I think he played also Globo Cartouche. And afterwards, I went to him and I said, do you remember? I saw you in Freiburg. He said, okay. And we were talking, and I said, do you give lessons? And he said, no, not really. No, it's not my thing. But I have a colleague, and this was Gaston Silvestre, so one of the trio of this famous trio Le Cercle. He's teaching in Rueil-Malmaison, which was not the Conservatoire National, which was an outside conservatory. And so next day I went there. And then Gaston Silvestre, he came, and he's a super nice South French, I think he's coming from Marseille person, really. He saw me and said, hello, nice to have you here, okay, so we start. Okay, and then I was in the class. And after half a year, he asked me, by the way, do you have an inscription in the school? an inscription? Must I have an inscription? Yes, you should. Yeah, maybe you should pass by the secretary. But they asked me, because you're working here every day, and they asked me, who's this guy who's there all the time? So then I went to the secretary and I did an inscription, and it costed money. And then, okay, it's like that. Yeah. So I was there with him, and he came. This was, for me, in a way, this was maybe the person I was searching for. He came by always 2 days in the week, and he came there in the morning around 10 or 11, and then he just knocked at the door and said, do we have a lesson today? And you said, maybe later in the afternoon? Okay, later in the afternoon. And so he passed by in the whole building, and he was just looking who's there, okay, and just asking, do you want a lesson? And if you didn't want to have a lesson, it was okay. Then he was working his own things. And so I really had a good time, because we were doing some percussion ensembles. So we did the classics, Amoris Cage, we did Lou Harrison. But we also did some apres pieces. And in a way you saw, because he was working in the same school, in a way when he had nothing to do, he was working on his pieces. So this means he was working on Bach fugues, because they wanted to play this as a trio. But
this is also the group who kind of pioneered music theater by Apagis, by Battistelli, by all these guys.
Absolutely.
In the 70s.
Absolutely. And he was working on this, but he was working also on Bach, and it was such a lot of wrong notes. It was incredible. Okay. Yeah, because in a way, he was a fantastic piano player, and he played, I don't know how many. I met him not a long time. I think he played 700 times Bartok Sonata, for example. 700 times. And so he was, in a way, Gaston Sylvestre, he was more the inventive guy who just had a lot of crazy ideas. But to tell the truth, in technique, because at the same time I started then, because I had this contact with Rumi Ogawa from Ensemble Moderne, she often called me just a week before or 2 days before, Christian, can you come? I have problems with my shoulder. Or she had a young daughter, and she said, could you just come and play for me? And I always said, yeah, okay, I'm coming. So I took a train and I went to Frankfurt, and I was playing there. So I was 21, 22. And then I realized in some pieces, my technique is not the best. So rolls, for example. So things, what you can imagine nowadays, if there's a guy who's playing percussion who's 20, that he can't do a real snare drum roll. But I couldn't do it. It was really... And so I asked my teacher, Gaston Sylvestre, what about the snare drum roll? How should I take the melody? He said, oh, come on, there are 50 ways to take the melodies. In Bali, you do it like this, and in Sri Lanka, you do it like this, and in Mexico, you take them like this, and just take one. Yeah, and then just listen to the sound, and then you'll find it. Okay, and I was a bit lost there, I have to say. So this means when there were pieces like Charles Ives pieces where you just had to do a good roll or just a timpani roll, I really couldn't do it. So then I was talking with Rumi, and Rumi said, yes, okay, I have somebody in Mannheim. This was very close to Frankfurt. Vasilios Papadopoulos, he's also one... He was one student also from Hamburg, from the Hinze School, where Bernhard Wolff also came. So it was a very much an orchestral really study, which was, I think, he was really great, because he really brought out a lot of very good players who were very open-minded. Maybe Papadopoulos is not really the person who was very open-minded, but he had an incredible technique. He was like this, that when you saw him playing cymbals, he played very much in the radio orchestra in Frankfurt. It was incredible. In Mahler, they just recorded this with Imbal. They recorded the Mahler symphonies. It was incredible. It was really, when he stood up, he really with long hair, and really a Greek guy who was just, it was like a miracle. It was really incredible. So this means then I started there to do Paris and Mannheim at the same time. This means I took always the night train coming from Paris to Mannheim, and there was 3 or 4 days in Mannheim, and then I went back to Paris. And I did Goldenberg xylophone school, and I did very hard snare drum melodies, snare drum etudes, a lot of technique, whole day, quite tough, I have to say, quite tough. Musically, super poor. But I started to get really a feeling, what is weight for the arm, what is weight in the fingers, how to treat, how to have different kind of possibilities to play staccato, to play legato, things I didn't knew before, which I think nowadays most of the percussion player, they get this with 12 or 13, yeah, because the teachers are just on another level. And this was completely missing to me. It was really a nightmare, I have to say. And so I had this school for 2 or 3 years. At the same time I did my civil service because I should go to military, and I didn't want to do this, so I did my civil service in a quite interesting neighborhood, because this was, Mannheim is really quite a poor town, and so in the center there was a center for young people who mostly immigrants from Turkey or from Syria or from really poor people in a way. And there was also a clinic for psychiatric problems. And so there was a lot of problems with alcohol. So this was for me very, how to say, I was first behind the bar, and then I thought I must do something with the young people, and then I established there some conga courses, because at the same time I have to say, what nowadays we have in schools, if I think now, what we try to give the students, that we try to open them the world in the way to show them, come on, it's not only snare drum drumming, you have African drumming, you have South American drumming, you have the whole Indian tradition, you have gamelan music, you have such a lot of things. Just try to get just a feeling what this is. At this time, in Mannheim, this was not possible. It was just xylophone, snare drum, timpani. This was it. And in a way, it was, I have to say, it was good, because it was very clear. Really, the fundamental was done there. And so in a way, even that after 2 years, I just broke with him. It was no more possible. I said, I need a change, and I wanted to change the school. And then he said, okay, where's your key? Just get out. So it was impossible to discuss with him. This was, for me as a teacher nowadays, was a super important experience, because I thought, well, that's really somebody like this I never want to be. That's really somebody where I think that's, if you close these young people who are open for everything, if you close them like this is like prison. So in a way, I really said, okay, that's really not my way. And then I went back here to Freiburg, and I started here again. Just in between. So when I was in Mannheim, I realized, so this world of music, only snare drum playing, only technique is not my world. So I started to go to Darmstadt and to take their really South American lessons in salsa music and in conga playing. And there was a very, very good teacher at this time, Ralf Mufang, he was called. He has a very good conga school. And this was super interesting. There we were a group. I went there every week. And it was super intense just to learn all the cascara. And he was really in this scene. There was a good scene because of the American army. They were in Frankfurt, so there was always a South American, let us say, line there in Frankfurt. And so I was working on this. So this was, for me, super inspiring, I have to say. And this was, in a way, this was my second step. The first step was, I was much younger. I was 14, 15. There was somebody here in Freiburg, Joachim Uhuru-Uhl. So he was really a guy, really a very solid Black Forest guy, let us say here. And he was doing here some African drumming courses with Adame. I'm not sure how I say Drame, but I'm not sure if this is really his name. But somebody from Ghana. And so he did these workshops, and there were quite a lot of workshops. And I always went there, even if I had no djembe, but there was a very strong fascination to this. So, and I remember that this was for me as 15, 16, this was also, it was somewhere in a basement. They had a flat and you never knew how many drugs they took already at this morning for this workshop. But I just came there and they accepted me quite. It was very nice, very, very open atmosphere. So, and then there came this African drummer, and he had no idea of how to give us lessons in this, because for them, if you ask them, but where's the one, he just said, yeah, but you just have to look to the dancer. Yeah, what does it mean? I have to look. Yeah, it's like this. And then he was dancing and said, yeah, it's clear. Yeah, but what is the one? What do you mean, what is the one? For him, there was no one. So I think this, in a way, this always took me out of my concept, what I have to do apart from Delaclu's etudes. So just to get an idea that the world is just much more colorful as I thought until there. And I think these inspiring moments, I always took them, and I had the same feeling, which I think a lot of students have these nowadays, that they feel a bit lost in all this because there are too much influences. That's absolutely right. But in a way, I think it's not, I never wanted to be an African drummer because I thought, well, they are so unique. I'm not coming from there. It's fascinating. I want to learn something from this, but in a way, it's not my world. And then with the jazz, it was a bit the same thing, I have to say. I thought, okay, it's really great what they do, but it's not really my thing. So I'm somewhere else. I have to go somewhere else. So I think this was important.
To round off the circle of sort of education experience and being an educator nowadays, or the last 25 years, maybe you can say something about how this influences your own teaching style and how maybe your pedagogical worldview, because you're teaching a class in Basel, you're teaching in Darmstadt, in Graz, and so many courses around the world, master classes. If you can condense your kind of teaching philosophy.
I think that's a very interesting point, and it's still a point where I always think about. Still don't have really the answer, I have to say. Maybe the most important thing is really to find out what the student, what he or what she really wants musically, what she or he wants personally. So in a way, we always start with a white paper and we make some drawings. What are your dreams? What do you want to do in 10 years? Where do you want to stand? And then surely that's sometimes these first scripts, they are not very realistic, but that's very good. I think that's the first step you have to take. And from there we see, okay, if you want to do this, so then we should do these pieces, then we should go in this direction. We should have a focus on this, on that. And then we try to schedule, let us say, the year. This is one thing, so the interest of the student. On the other hand, I always try to say them that they should have, if they go out of the school, that they have a quite wide range of things. So they have to have tools to know what is complexity. So they have to know how to deal with a thing like 13/9. So they have to work one piece in this direction. They have to work on hand drumming. So they have to think about, okay, what does this mean if I have a conga? What is the difference between the conga playing and the darabuka playing? How can I find there a relation to an instrument which is very close? Which is very close to me, where I have no sticks, which is near my body, because often we don't have this relation to an instrument now. So I always try to push them that they learn a hand drum, which is really close, that they really touch it, that they really have a feeling of the skin, that they start to like the instrument, which is not just far away, which they beat only with sticks. So I think that's super important to have this relation. Then the next step is, what about performing? How do you perform a piece, even a marimba piece? Or so how are you on scene? So that's very important to play with pieces where you have no instrument, where you just, let us say, in a way, naked in front of the public. Not really naked, you still have maybe some clothes on, or maybe half naked, like in Corporel Globocar. So these are important steps just to take. How am I performing? How do I take it's a bit actor method, no? So how do you see somebody from outside? That's very interesting for all, whatever you do, even if you do afterwards an orchestral audition, it's very interesting. Then on the next step, it's very important just to get pieces. If the students are coming, they have often an idea to play small setups. Let us say like Rebond by Xenakis, let us say like other pieces by if it's a piece by Lang or David Lang or somebody else. So smaller setups, but you don't have this feeling of your back. So this means what happens if you have to play this tam-tam which is hanging behind you. How to get a relation? How to get a relation to space? I think this opening to the third dimension, that's very, very important for us, because we have a lot of pieces where we have just a setup which is, we are surrounded by instruments, and I think that's quite a big thing for a student, which normally he played only instruments which he sees in front of him. And then surely another thing is also music theater. So this means to work with speech, to work how to pronounce, and so it's all things, it's quite complex. It's absolutely right, because we have already all these instruments, and then it's another steps which you have to involve. So I try really to give them as much as information as I can. Sometimes I can't, sometimes I don't know so sometimes for example, we have a speech trainer, which she comes twice the years, and she's, or 4 times the years, 2 times in the semester, to give lessons. That's very, very good things. We have people from more from the performance, more from the opera side. They come and they give us lessons with music theater. I think there's some things I can easily teach. Some other things it's very good to have other specialists. And so I try to in the conservatory, I really try to get as much inputs from other classes, and that's from other classes, from other teachers, but I have to say also from the students. So I'm really quite proud at the moment that the class had such a big variety of people who are interested in such a lot of different things. So some specialists really only in electronic music. So they will do now a workshop in 2 weeks about transducers, and about very, very small microphones which you put into small boxes. Or then I have somebody who just did Corona videos around his house in Finland, and always with different angles, and always taking in the environment from the outside and trying to find pieces which work with this. And he will do a speech about this. I think these are all concepts where I think that the students really, they search for a certain kind of originality, which is absolutely interesting for their later life. But in a way, I don't want to push this too much, because it's just to be original. It's not everything. So I always try to get them also back to see what are our classics. And I think it's absolutely necessary to have a knowledge about our first solo percussion pieces, apart from, let us say, the development of all the instruments. So historic review to have about not only about the European Western music. This really starts not even with Mozart. It starts much earlier in the Middle Age. But also, so to have this influence by the Jarisaren music in Mozart music, so the whole Turkish influence, the Oriental influence, but also to talk about the effects, what Berlioz, for example, created when he thought about the first mallets making, and what are these
harmonizing
kind of
with timpani and with soft mallets, and
these mallets, Kachuk mallets, so. Then to go over to Mahler, to go to Stravinsky. I think these are very important steps, absolutely. And then to go to Varese, and then afterwards to think about the first setup pieces. So Cage, Morten Feldman, Karl-Heinz Stockhausen, Helmut Lachenmann. So these pieces, everybody should have played one of these 4 main pieces, I think.
Do you see those as more as study pieces to kind of have a relationship to the historical repertoire? Or do you think they still have a relevance in the scene? And if so, how do you push them, if at all, in the direction of finding their own voice within those styles that have been played for such a long time?
I think it's very important that they get a relation to these pieces, to the sound world, because these influence just our thinking of the next generation, the next pieces which came up in the 70s, 80s, 90s. They really were all influenced by these 4 pieces. So it's very, very important to know where we're coming from. And then to put this, maybe it's not interesting to play in one evening all the 4, but maybe to find a relation to these pieces. So this means to build up a program where you can say, okay, I integrate this in another concept. So if you have maybe only electronic pieces and then inside you have cyclus, and you try to maybe even to find a possibility to amplify some of the things there inside to get another focus. Or another way, you work with light and you try to illuminate this piece in another way. Or you think about cycles, so because cyclus is really a cycle piece, so you think about all other pieces which have circles, and to find their different kind of aspects. I think it's not interesting just to play these pieces again and again and again. Even for yourself, it's super interesting, because I think the work clearly Morten Feldman, King of Denmark, where you have no sticks in your hand, where you just have your hands and you're just touching. I think it's a bit the same aspect, if like with hand drumming, that you really have to go to this direction, that you get a contact with your skin to the skin or to the metal or to the wood, but you get a relation and they touch the instruments, and it's not, again, this stick what you have in your hand, which you beat on something where you have not really feedback of. If you play fortissimo, it hurts in the hand, and it's just rough. And if you have a stick inside you, it doesn't hurt. So I think these things you have to learn. Yeah. It's so it seems so simple, but you really have to learn this relation. And I think that's in all the 4 pieces. So in Lachemann, it's more the sound world where you really have to get in. We have to relate the sounds. You have to find, with combination of sounds, a new aspect. And in Cyclus, it's clear, it's really the aspect of just where am I as a performer? What should I decide? What can I decide? Is this possible? Is this not? Is this making sense? Is this making no sense? If I use there, let us say, another triangle, is this good for the piece of practical reasons or of musical reasons? So all these questions which come up and which are super, super difficult to answer, because you have nobody who will say this. And that's also, as a teacher, I try to help in these first steps, but from a certain point I also say, okay, it's your version now. I can give you my opinion, but you should do your research. And then, in a way, my goal is really to bring them like this, that I propose something, and they say, no, maybe, no, I think when I think now about my concept is different, and that's great.
Yeah. I mean, the openness of a lot of percussion works, because the sound research in percussion can go on for a lifetime, and of course any interpretation of any classical music can in a kind of a microscopic sense go on for a lifetime. So maybe let's turn the conversation towards how you teach them the more entrepreneurial sides of being a musician. Because we talked about how they build a portfolio, how they design their own repertoire, and maybe fill in the gaps or not in the scene, as it were. Do you have any approaches to how to teach them to get into the music scene in terms of getting gigs in the festivals, maybe even getting a teaching job? Have an internet presence, making records, if that makes any sense any longer. Do you have a class on entrepreneurship or how to create
Absolutely.
organizations?
I have this, and I think there are some things you can help them really general. This means the web presence is very important. Just put only videos online where you're really convinced that you have something to say and that it's not another another, let us say, another recording where we have already 500, because it won't be interesting. That's maybe for your ego, it's interesting that you are really, you're present. But I think you should add something to these already much too much informations we have in the net. You should add something special. And clearly what is special? So again, not to search just only searching because you want to be special. It's on your way of your development. I think you should have a good documentation. I think that's the most important thing. So documentation of what you're doing, and try to get this on a very high level. And because this is afterwards interesting also to send this out and to get gigs, it's clear. I think it's this kind of networking what you have to do. So you have to be present in the net, but you also should have a personal contact to people. So after Corona, you should try really to get again to the festivals, to listen to music, to talk to the people. That's always a good thing. Surely it's sometimes also from my side, it's frustrating. You write an email and you rewrite the email, you get no answer. Because some of the people who are doing the programs, who are running the festivals, they get such a lot of emails every day. They can't respond to or they don't want to, or however. So you always have to try with a new idea, and not to be, too pushy, but in a way just to remind, I wrote already one last month or last year, and now I have a new idea. I would like to try to introduce you to this, to be very friendly, but just to send it again and again.
A Norwegian colleague of mine, he always reminds me that a musician should never be shameful of trying to play their music somewhere.
Absolutely. And I think it's not, nobody is there just will say, oh, I hate this person, he's old. If you always call for the same thing, it's boring. It's clear. So this we all know that if somebody repeats always the same questions and the same demands, that's not interesting. So you always have to come then with another project. You have to develop the thing. And so that's clear. Web presence is important, but also being present as a person and try to talk. And this means for a lot of things. So this means if you wanted to solo career, surely it's interesting to talk with composers, with the programmers, you have to do your competitions. There's a certain kind of things you have to do. If you want to go more on chamber music, you should meet the other players of other groups. You should meet members of other groups. You should be there in contact, because this just happened like this. Not only because I think that's very often we have this problem that the students, they feel safe at the beginning, very unsure. They come to the Hochschule, to the Conservatory of Music, and they try to establish a bit their own position, and then it's good. And then inside the Hochschule, on the Conservatory, they feel well, but then outside it's another world. So outside, they have stopped their studies, and I think that's super important. As a teacher, that's very important to have this in mind, what happens after the studies. So I always try to, 1 year before, I always try to have them really, what is your plan? What is your plan after the studies? And then sometimes they have an idea, sometimes they don't have an idea. It's not important that everything is clear, but I think during this last year, they have to have some fantasies about what they really want to do, with whom they want to connect. And because when they have finished the exam, because the last month then maybe it's just concentrated on the exam, and then they don't have the time to think about this. So it's afterwards you're just alone, and that's super boring. And so I think we have to help these, and that's a bit our work as a teacher, that we have to come by during these studies to think to the next steps, to think about this long term, maybe just to finish from before. So when I was thrown out in Mannheim, I came back to Freiburg, and I was it was just a great thing that Bernhard Wolf, he just said, okay, come back, it's good. He didn't see me over 4 or 5 years, and he just said, no, it's good, come back. Okay, he gave me a place, and he gave me the opportunity to start again. And I'm really very, very grateful for this, that he really just opened the school and said, okay, let us see. And surely, as Bernhard Wolff, he's very philosophical in his way of teaching, and he really opens up your mind and thinking about music. And there was a good class, so I was very, very motivated. Somebody was working at this moment of Psafa, and I thought, well, how is this possible? And he was really inside, and there was no idea. He was the first to play it here in Freiburg. So, is there a possibility to play really this piece? Is it? No, it's not possible. So we really tried to. So I was the second to play this piece, and then I got in contact with younger composers, with Johannes Schöllhorn. So I did his Handstücke. This was the creation. So then I found, that's maybe my way. That's really my way of getting in contact and creating new things. And then I found also a certain kind of liberty, which before I didn't see really in this, let us say mainstream jazz world. And I saw, okay, there's a possibility to work on. And so, let us say, with this freedom I had here in Freiburg, together with Bernhard, because he opened me some doors that I went then, during the studies, I went to, it's Akademie Schloss Solitude. It's a place near Stuttgart where you just live for 1 year and you're paid and you work together with sculptors and poets and
you created
composers.
This beautiful percussion duo, I think, with François Revalant and the Carola Barkov piece.
Yeah,
I remember
that's right.
The Ingewohnte Umgebung, number two, which is so funny.
Yeah. This was still the work together with Françoise Revalant was coming from the Paris time, because she was studying at the same time in Paris. And so we always had this idea to do things together, and we had a good time. Really, we were quite close, but also very different in the way of working. She's a very, very hardworking woman. And really, she never stops. It's this I really learned from her, that you just have to go to the end, and so in a way, there were always a lot of. So we first had a trio together with somebody from Geneva, and we were playing more or less the repertoire of Trio Le Cercle. Then it was difficult with the trio because of time problems. Then we started to do a duo. And so I always had these small formations, let us say like this. So where I started also then afterwards to play in 88. So during my studies still I was playing with Ensemble Aventure and Ensemble here from Freiburg. And then I started also Ensemble Recherche. They asked me to play. And then from maybe in 90, they just said, you have to decide now if you want to play this ensemble or that ensemble. It was a bit of a concurrent situation here on the market. So I decided to play with this smaller group, Ensemble Recherche. So we were 8 players. So since 88, I'm in the group with a small moment where I thought I should change something in my life, because I came from Freiburg. Well, I studied in Paris, but I had a bit the impression I have to go out a bit and to see something else. So I went to Musikfabrik for 2 years and played there in Musikfabrik. And this was a good time. The group was very different than today. I think it was much more conducted music, less of chamber music like today. I think today I really admire this group very much. It's really super what they do. But at this time, it was a lot of things were conducted. And I felt a bit like an orchestra musician. I was just there and reading my newspaper when I had nothing to do. And I felt a bit, okay, I'm going in a direction I don't like this too much. So I went back to Recherche just to be more, let us say, in a smaller group, to be more a solistic player, where you have, even if sometimes, I have to say, sometimes there are pieces where you don't have very much to do, but sometimes you have pieces where you have a lot to do. And also the way of working in a group over so long, such a lot of time, it's really very much like a family. It's absolutely clear. Yeah, you know the other people so well. So
you're also very close to the artistic decisions, I guess.
Absolutely.
It's a democratic system where you choose what to play and how to play it.
Yeah. So in a way, it's clear, 8 musicians, you can't discuss everything. That's not possible, and we had times where we had a very clear let us say, some people who were saying had more to say and were very present. And then we had periods where we tried to do everything, to discuss everything with all 8 of us. And this always changed a bit. But it's always a discussion, I would say. We can always, if we have the impression it's not working like that, we have an office, so that's very good. And so they organize a lot of things. And depending of our input.
But did you sit down and make a structure for how you were going to rehearse, for instance, or did that just happen as you went? So the decision making, for instance, was it like this player decides this piece or this player takes responsibility for this piece?
It's clear in these small groups, there are always people who have a stronger interest than others because of personal reasons, because of professional reasons. At the beginning, I would say in 88, it was mainly a string trio with a flute and with a clarinet and then with a piano. And then some people went out of the orchestra to play only with ensemble recherche, so this changed a lot. I was, as a percussion player, sometimes on, sometimes not, because surely there were some travel expenses with the percussion transport. I did everything on my own at this point, so over a long period. That's also why I went out of the ensemble after a while, because I said, I can't do this anymore alone. I had my own truck, I did all the travels, and surely you know these at the beginning. You don't play in the big halls, you play in rooms which are on the second floor, so you have to transport the marimba upside and you're really done after a tour. So I said, I won't do this anymore. If I don't get a helper, I'll stop. And so they said, it's not possible to have a helper because of financial reasons, so I stopped. And then I went to Musikfabrik, and there were helpers. This was much better organized in these ways. So when I came back, I said, I only come back if I have a helper. So I started to have a helper, and this was a good thing. That's really a thing. Surely, economic-wise, it costs money, but this saves me a lot of energy. And I'm sure I always said this to colleagues, if I see somebody who's still doing everything, driving, packing, bringing up the instruments, and it's just such a lot of work. And in a way, in a chamber music group, you always have one or two who help you. But helping means also if the instruments, the cases are on stage, they help you to build up the marimba, because when not, the rehearsal will start 2 hours later. So they help you. It's nice, and I'm super grateful for this, that there were really colleagues who always helped. But it's your work. And in a way, I think that's really a thing you have to learn, that if you want to play, also if you do solo concerts, I think you just need somebody, because it's your arms, it's your hands, and after you have to do all these virtuosic things. You can't do this just if you just unpack the whole van.
To have the structure to focus on the music making. But then you really managed with Ensemble Recherche to build this unique structure, which I think is very special. You have a small group of people, and you now that's until recently stayed together as a family. You did an immense amount of work throughout the late 80s and the 90s, the 2000s. You worked with every thinkable composer, made tons of records, toured the world, played all the concert houses and the festivals. So in a way, it's a success story of a new music ensemble that really did so much work. You have your own ensemble house. We have beautiful rehearsal spaces. You have support from the city, from the region, if there's such a thing as the high point of new music, chamber music making, I guess Ensemble Recherche is maybe that group in Europe. Would you agree?
Well, I see this from inside, so I see this a bit different, that's for sure. But it's clear it's also, compared with nowadays, this was also the time. You had at this time, so in the 80s, 90s, you had some big groups like Ensemble Accanto, like Ensemble Modern, like Klangforum.
But these are all conducted groups, so with
more or less, yeah. These are all bigger groups. This means the members are between 16 and 24. So it's going more in the direction of an orchestra. And there were not such a lot of small groups at this time running. All the small groups were players who played also in the orchestra, so they did this as a side job. So I think the decision to make this as a main income, this was super important for the group. So some people went out of the orchestra and really said, okay, I go on this freelance thing. And from outside, it sounds like as you say, as a very successful group, and I think that's like that if you look to the history. But we also had a lot of crises. It's very, very clear. So this means it's not just the thing you see from outside is one thing, but inside we had. Like all the groups, you have a lot of discussions. Why do we do this? Why this repertoire? Why not this repertoire? Why do we work with this composer? No, we don't like this composer. And if you think about this, if we do in the year 60 new pieces, and if there are 2 of them are really good pieces, then you're happy. And you have from these 60, if you have 5 or 6 which you continue to play, that's already a success. So you can imagine the work and the investment everybody is giving, because in a way, and I think that's the interesting thing why I always kept on playing with this group, is that if the composer is coming, and there are some composers, some moments where I remember this was really for me a bit the opening things. For example, Salvatore Sciarrino, he came here, he wrote this piece Infinito Nero, and he came here and he said, yes, it's almost finished. It was maybe a week before the premiere. Almost finished, but for percussion, I still don't know what kind of sounds. Okay, he had a bass drum. He had this muffled bass drum sound, like heartbeat things, stick on the bass drum. Nice sound, okay. He had this, and then he wanted a bell sound. And then we went for one afternoon, we went in my studio, and we were just talking about this bell sound. He said, yes, maybe around an F or F sharp, but maybe both, or okay. So I had one bell, church bell, and a rin, and a tubular bell, and then we tried over 3 hours. We tried different kind of melodies to produce this sound, and it was super interesting for me. I have to say, there I really thought, wow, that's really the work I want to do. So this means just to take this mallet from Jerry Burton mallet from the vibraphone, to take these on the tubular bell, and then another mallet from a Massa mallet from on the rin, and then change them. No, it's better like this. No, it was more interesting like this. Maybe we should change the F rin to a G rin. Okay, no, I still have another one which is in B. Okay, we tried out all the possible, and he was just sitting there and said, yeah, okay, maybe it's more like this. And there I really felt that suddenly I had a space inside of this sound searching, because he gave me this space. What do you think? He always said, what do you think? Is this more? Well, I don't know, you're the composer. But yes, but you're the player, so what do you like more? So this was for me super inspiring, I have to say.
It gave you the creative space to contribute.
Absolutely,
yeah.
Absolutely.
And we should also add for interested readers that you later came to write a book about the techniques of percussion playing and mallets and all these special designs that you got from your hands-on experience with composers.
That's right. And maybe this came from this experience, just of knowing that just the way we play, the whole movement coming from the arm is super important. And maybe this could be a next book now of the movement of the body. But then I started in a way, somebody asked me, don't you want to do a book about percussion? I said, yeah, in a way it's a nice thing, because we have these masterworks, I think, but they are all from the 60s or from the 70s. So I thought maybe it's good to do about new techniques in percussion. But then I realized it's such a lot of work. So I should reduce it to one thing. And then I thought, okay, it's just about advices. And I thought, okay, we just talk about mallets. And then I thought, okay, it's not only about mallets, it's also about electronic items which you can use. And it's also about brushes, and it's a lot of things. Suddenly it got very, very big, the theme. And then I said, okay, I can't do this. This whole project was a project of about 10 years of research. Because in a way, we started then to record sounds, and then we thought, okay, recording is nice, but does this really help? We should do videos. And so then, in a way, I thought, I can't do this alone. So I took Michel Roth together. He's somebody from my department in Basel, a composer. And then I took an ex-student, Jens Ruland, inside the boat, and we tried to do this together. And that was, in a way, this was for me very helpful. Just to work in groups. I think this was for me in the whole way I'm doing my experiences in music is always very helpful, not to always try to do everything alone, just to get help. And to try to establish teams which you're working with, because I need this. It's a bit. I think my head would explode because it's just too much things. So I like these team models. So also maybe that's something which is interesting then in the history. So when I started then during my studies to play with recherche, and then some years later in 1994 I started to play with the trio Accanto, which was a formation at this time. So it's saxophone, piano, and percussion. It's still like this, but at this time it was Yukiko Sugawara Lachemann, who was the piano player, and it was a very inspiring group for me, super important, because in a way I was a bit more solistic than in the ensemble recherche. And together with Markus Weiss, the saxophone player, who is now a colleague with me in Basel. And so we really had very, very good and inspiring constant. We always did creation, that's clear, because there was no repertoire. Then, so some years ago, Yukiko, she said it's just too much for her. She would like to stop. And when then we took in Nicholas Hodges, who's just an absolutely great player. And this changed also the group. Now it's a man group. It's only 3 men. So we have another different energy. And so these two worlds, in a way, was always inspiring for me, not to have only one family, but to do a bit different things in the chamber music world. But then, in a way, I really stopped to play the bigger ensembles, because then suddenly I found, it's just, I don't have all the time. I can't do everything. And I think that's very important. And this, to reflect what is important for you now. And I think that's for the younger student, that's super important. You have all these possibilities, and maybe sometimes it's too much. And I don't think that there's a wrong. If I look back, there was not a wrong thing. Sometimes I went to Zurich and to take tabla lessons with a teacher. And when I went there, I thought, well, I didn't train enough. It was just, I didn't really have the time because there were too much other things running. But it was so inspiring what he taught me about rhythm language. And I came back and I thought, wow, that's really great. He's such a good tabla player, and I really would like, but I don't have the time. So in a way, I just took this insight of my whole thinking. And I think that's maybe the most important thing. Whatever you do it with your whole energy, and don't think about the things which pass by, which you can't do. It's not important. The most important is to take out of this, to try to take out of this really the essential. And even if afterwards you won't be this player, but try to take this energy and try to bring this in your world. And at the end, it's a big mix of a lot of things. But I think that's the most interesting thing. It's you can't do everything. That's absolutely clear. And you should not always just hesitate while thinking, oh, I'm working this now, but I should also work the vibraphone. No, I should know, what about the marimba? What is about the snare drum? Oh, I forgot to work cymbal. So that's a nightmare, I think. And so in a way, I learned this, that when you do this, just do this.
This is the principle of Zen meditation.
Absolutely. Just be concentrated on this. And afterwards, 2 hours later, or maybe 1 week later, or maybe 1 year later, or maybe 10 years later, you'll realize, okay, I really forgot this. And this was for me a super important point when I was around, this was 2004. It started maybe a bit earlier. So I was already 35. I realized it was around this time, in 30s. I got a possibility to play in a tour, Rising Star tour. It was in the whole, over Europe or the world. It was the big concert halls. They offered me to play a solo concert. And I thought, well, that's great. It's super. What would I play? And then I looked back and I thought, well, I could play Lachemann Antérieur, I could play Donatoni Oma, I could play the Hanse piece, I could play Globo Cartouche, maybe Corporel, maybe Apergis. So I had, like, let's say 10 pieces where I really thought, that's nice. But then afterwards I thought, yeah, but okay, I'm playing such a lot of creations with ensembles, but I don't have really a solo repertoire. So in a way, during this tour, I realized I should ask, and then somebody said to me, yeah, why don't you do more younger, newer pieces? And I said, I don't know really newer pieces. I'm not sure if, so I really recognized then that I should have this responsibility to create also new pieces, because in a way, I'm one of the new generation's players, and I'm already 35, so I should really take care that we get another repertoire.
That's a very interesting point. I have the same experience, that when you learn a lot of repertoire from the historical canon, you get some sort of Ehresfurcht, what's the word in English? I don't know.
Yeah.
That what can you possibly contribute that's worthwhile?
And I think it's super important. So at the moment, if I make the year plan for a student, or if we do it together, then I always say you have to have these classics in your repertoire. You should really do this. But then you should also have composer pieces which were done in the last 5 years. And then you should have pieces which you create. Because that's the future for you. Because you will only get concerts a bit too much, but you will get important concerts only because you're related to composers. I think it's very interesting to play all this repertoire. It's good, but there's always somebody who has done this already and who is the first name, and you should learn from this. Absolutely, that's our Beethoven. So it's clear, our Xenakis and Lachemann and Stockhausen, that's our tradition. These are our pieces by Haydn, Beethoven, and Mozart and Chopin. These are our composers. And we don't have very much. That's a very, very sad story about this. And that's also why we should really move on to create good pieces, because we have a lot of pieces which are really not very interesting musically, not for the music, which are interesting to learn the instrument, but not interesting musically, and no big hall will ask you for these pieces. I don't want to name them at the moment, but there is such a lot of repertoire, which is very often played in competition, which is very much played in all these meetings, percussion meetings, where you just have very, very, very musically very sad and bad repertoire, which is just good to learn the instrument. Absolutely right. Absolutely necessary, because we don't have these etudes by Scarlatti or things like this, or Paganini, which is also great music. Yeah, which is super virtuose, but it's also good music. And so we don't have this. So that's quite a difficult situation, I think. So that's super important that we have to go on there to establish that everybody is establishing his own repertoire and bring on this.
Vor 10 Uhr die Leiche herum. Dumm. Schlag. 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 Schlag auf Schlag. Schlag auf Schlag. Seitenschlag auf Schlag. Den Seitenschlag auf Schlag. Beiden Seiten Schlag auf Schlag. Von beiden Seiten Schlag auf Schlag.
You mentioned web presence and, of course, recorded media. What's your take on the whole recording industry in classical or in new music? Was that ever an economy for you in your career? And is it still an economy in that, like in terms of that being an important part of your work? And how has that changed for you? Because you still produce quite a lot of records. Like, do you still even believe in the physical object of an album?
Very interesting question. I think for the younger generation, it's much more obvious that it's no more interesting. I think maybe I or the groups I'm playing with is still a bit old-fashioned. But it's clear 10 years ago, you could earn some money with doing a record. At the moment, you just invest. So you have to, I'm still there. I produced a solo CD 2 years ago, and I still think, should I invest now these 5,000 euros for my solo CD? It's more or less all done. Should I invest this money, yes or no? I still don't know. And it's a bit, at the moment, the publisher, he's a bit unsure. And so I don't push it very much. I don't know where this really ends. But it's also a shame. It's a certain kind of object which you have, and it's different if you just stream it somewhere, or if you just you download it from somewhere. It's different. So it's an object you have in your hand. So I still believe in this in a way. But on the other hand, I have to say, is it really, for the students, is it really worth? So I think I'm a bit the last generation where we think it's still important to do this. And this depends also a bit on the group. So I play in these two formations with Ensemble Recherche, where we still do CDs, but we don't invest too much money for this. With the trio Accanto, until now, we were still producing CDs, and we invested some money in. So it's always a discussion in the group also. I have a position for my own work, but in the group, it's always, you have to discuss it.
What do you feel are the pros and the cons of making a real professional audio production of a piece?
Well, it's clear if you go to a studio and if you have really the whole technique there, it's quite amazing what they do just because it's their job.
It does something to your interpretation as well, right? Because you hear so much more details than in a concert recording.
Yeah. So I'm much more aware of all the details. So for some things I remember I was completely shocked when I did a recording of Zyklus, and I needed 16 minutes, and I said, shit, normally I'm really much quicker, because I tried to wear everything right. And surely that's a big risk, because in a concert situation, you play more on the whole, and you don't try to focus on these small details. Where surely if somebody has played the piece, he can say, yes, but this was not the second tom-tom, this was just the third tom-tom, or this rim shot didn't work really. So what do you do with this perfection? I think for me personally, the studio work I really like this very, very much. I like to be in a studio alone, it's silent, and you just produce the thing, and you have this focus and this concentration. I think that's super, super worthwhile, just to be aware what you produce. And then, in a way, it's very, very different if I just put two mics in the room and I don't have this technical help by somebody, not only for cutting or giving inputs from outside. So I think the whole recording method really learned me such a lot, I have to say.
Can you mention 2 or 3 records that really changed your life, or that you felt changed your practice into something better?
Yeah, I have to say that the work together with Helmut Lachemann on Intérieur, this really changed a lot for me, because not only
this is
during
1995,
95. I played the piece already several times, so I knew it quite well. I played it on a tour, and I felt comfortable with the piece. Then he had quite a lot of new ideas, which was good. And then also during the process of recording, he was there, and he also had other ideas. This was also very inspiring. So I was really, my head was exploding in a way, because I had such a lot of things to think about. But it was very good. And then what was interesting, afterwards, he sent me a whole list of more or less 30 or 40 points, where he said, it's really great, this recording, but maybe here, this or that or that or that. So I thought, wow, these just never stop. If you do a good recording and you are happy, and the composer was happy, if he re-listens the thing again, there are still points. And I think to learn that this product is not just the end of something. It's not the beginning, but it's during your process. You do some recordings, and then this is a documentation of this moment. And maybe you will do this very, very different. I know there's maybe a second one. It's Claude Vivier, the Cinq Chansons, it's called, the piece. So it's for a lot of Balinese instruments, Indonesian instruments. And so I was asked by Harry Vogt for the WDR to do this recording because he wanted to do a CD about Claude Vivier. So I started the piece, and very soon I realized, well, I don't have all the instruments, all these Balinese gongs. They were very difficult to get, and so I asked in all the gamelan ensembles which were here around, let us say in around 100 kilometers, I asked them, could I get this gong and that gong? And then I got some also from far away, and I had all the instruments. It was working, but some were rattling. So during the recording, we had the problem. We were in Cologne, and some of the instruments were rattling. What can I do? Okay, then I filled in some hot water, boiled water, and just to give another tension on the metal. And then, in a way, during the recording, for 2 or 3 minutes, it was no more rattling. And you can imagine, so I was really, while cooking in the kitchen, some hot water to put it inside to dry the instrument, to bring it back. So the recording was really special. And now if I listen to the piece now, I would play it so differently. Yeah, because I was in a way so focused again on this playing all the notes to make everything right. I think that I didn't got really the gesture of the piece. I was too much in details. So I think this came then later when I heard the recording. I was a bit shocked. I thought, okay, it's right, but it's in a way it's right, but is this interesting? So I think that's very, very important to get this flow into the music.
Was there a certain fright connected to doing that piece on the record, and because you've played it live, and then you probably have a different approach?
Absolutely. I think that's always a good thing, that if you have you played the piece 10 times live, then you're much more safe.
Are you someone who prefers to play it as if it's live on record? You prepare the whole piece and you play as long parts as possible, or do you prefer to chop it up?
I come a bit from this tradition that you look for all the details, but you have the whole thing in your mind. So we did just with a trio, we did a Christian Wolf CD last year, where a lot of things are free, a lot of choices can be made in the moment. So that's very, very interesting, because there, in a way, you can't really cut, because somebody will go maybe there or will do this or that. So we had to do just much longer takes. This was very, very good experience, because in a way I like this more. I come from this tradition to have everything right, everything correct for the recording, every measure to take it in detail. But at the end, I think the whole thing, you can get lost so quickly that afterwards you don't feel the tension because it's too much bits. So maybe it's more interesting to do the whole thing first, and then if there are really things, you can try to get them in or to get them out, some accidents which happened.
what you feel is a driving force in your own playing. You wrote a whole book about sound research on percussion. What is your view on the next development in this direction? Is there a point where there's enough sound research, or where it gets pointless? What is still fascinating for you in the world of percussion and in the world of music in a broader sense?
In a way, the older I get, less interested I'm just in technique or in virtuosity. That's no more my thing. I think this has changed a bit. So I'm still very interested in sound, I have to say. So that's still a thing to explore. And there's a question: is there an end for this sound research? For me personal, not really, because the questions always change. So let us say the question of reproducing things. So if you do today, you do a piece about, let us say, about insects, about sound of insects. That's surely it's also a political statement. So it's clear that if you just think about these small insects, which they lose a bit the space in our world, just to be free. So that's a theme. Or if you think about other themes about environment, if you do a piece about the melting glaciers, for example, the sound is amazing. The sound, what these glaciers do, it's really incredible. I just heard a radio emission about this. It was just, wow, I thought, what is this sound? If they break now, it's so beautiful, so nice, but so scary also. So I think these questions, surely you could have done also a production about the melting glaciers 20 years ago, because they were melting already. But now it has another question. So, I think that's very, very important for the next generation. Just we had these discussions in the 60s. We had these discussions again 20 years ago about political music. What is political music? Should an artist make political music? It's clearly that all the statements we do during our performance, which are political, that's always a bit too placative. So it's just too obvious. It doesn't really fit into our thing, I would say.
What aspect of it? The sensuous aspect?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I think, but there's in a way, it's really like that you find a lot of themes where you can enter as an artist with a theme where you're aware and where you show that you're aware of our environment, and you can reproduce this or bring this in a direction where you show that you're aware of these things, and that you make the people just listen to these problems, that art is not out of society. I think that's very, very important. So about censorship, it's very important to think also about yourself. What do you do as an artist? Where do you go as an artist? Do you go to China? Yes or no? Is it important for the world there that you come there with maybe another repertoire? Is it important, or is it just another thing which nobody sees there? So I think these questions are super important for us. How much as a artist should you travel nowadays? What about just your footprint, what you give to the world? When you just have every week you have a plane to take to play in this festival and that festival. Is this necessary? Is it good? Is it important? These are questions I think we really have to think about, and we have to ask ourselves, is this important? So I ask myself this very, very often when I'm invited for juries somewhere far away. Let us take again China. So is it important that I travel there for 3 days to sit there in a jury? I don't think it's important. I don't think it must not be me. Is it? So these questions, I think it's very, very important, because surely we have also this responsibility for our environment, for our living. And we just can't say, yes, I was engaged and I'm an artist, I have to go there. I think you have quite a lot of possibilities. And that's now because of the corona crisis. I do now a lot of workshops in next week there, for example, in Spain, where normally 2 years, 3 years ago, I would have taken a flight to there and I would have been there for 2 days and then come back. I can do this very easy here via Zoom or surely we have another presence, no question about, and I don't want to miss this situation I don't want to go back to the situation of teaching only with Skype or via Zoom. I think it's not for the students in the long term. It's really not interesting. But surely you can do a workshop like this. You must fly over the whole world just to do this workshop. I think that's not reasonable.
How do you regard the interest for the music that you do, seen from today's perspective, as opposed to when you started in the 80s? And where do you see it go over the next 10 to 20 years?
It's very, very clear that I still come from this starting point where electronic music was done by bigger studios and was not done by the musician or by the performer. So that's very clear that for nowadays, as a percussion player, you have to be aware that you have these technical possibilities to work with transducers, to work with mics, just to put this thing inside. This should be just another instrument for you. I think that's very, very clear. And we didn't have this 30, 40 years ago. It was just, there was always coming a technician who helped you to build up the things.
Has the possibility that everyone can have a studio in their home, in their own bedroom, the internet, the accessibility to everything made the do-it-yourself aspect more important to build a career? Can we even see future new musicians create their own festivals and not even care about the institutionalized festivals, and even just go beyond the curatorial filtering and just don't even look in that direction? But that has been so important for your generation, maybe for my generation, to kind of come through the filters of the festivals and the institutions and the record companies. Do you see that falling apart somehow, or do you see it being possible to reject that altogether and just create your own little community based on internet?
I think this is working already. No, there are some people who already make their money just being influencers and they don't play concerts. They just show things in the internet. I think there are people who are doing this.
You made me sound like an old timer now.
Yeah. I haven't really thought. For me, it's no way, and also for the students, I'm not sure if I really would like to see them there, because in a way I think music making is a thing to be with somebody in a room and to feel the vibes and to have this, I don't know if it's really interaction, but to be presence. I think it's important. I don't see everything online in the future.
Maybe that was a bad formulation for me. I didn't mean that everything should happen in the internet, but as a way of building international communities without the travel, maybe. And of course, you can have things happening physically, and the concert is still an important event. But I meant more as a way of avoiding the festivals' curatorial take on things, where they exclude as much as they include.
Absolutely right. And this I see completely. There are groups now who try to get their own. They search for their own financial budget, and they we have this in Switzerland very, very much, because a lot of concerts happen very different, like in the rest of the world. Maybe in Holland it's a bit the same. So you try to get money from different organizations to make your tour, and so you're completely independent of what you do, not where you do it, because that's in a way it's required that if you get the money from this foundation, then you should do this concert there and there and there, but you're free in the programs. So that's very, very positive. It's a lot of work, absolutely clear. But this produces a lot of possibilities, and I think this will come more in the rest of the world. I absolutely agree on this. But it's surely at the moment still the festivals, and mainly the radio festivals, they have much more money. So I think you should not ignore this market. I think you should be present there, and you should try to get their possibilities to perform there, because they have more. Also, they have more. It's clear that not only more money and not only the technical stuff to organize the concert, but it's also clear they have more press there. They have more attention. It's clear that if you have their performance, it's something else if you produce your own festival. But I think that's very, very important for us as musicians to be also your organizer and to think about what could I do or what small festival, because what means a festival? A festival is already, if you do every year you do one concert at the same place, it's in a way it's already a festival. So and you have such a lot of contacts, or you get such a lot of contact as students that you can easily do something on your own. And I think don't risk these steps. This is important. Risk these steps. Just don't think that somebody will call you and say, okay, do you want to take over this festival or do you want to play on this festival? Do it on your own. I think that's very important. If this works out economically, that's then another thing. But I think that's also for an organizer, it's super impressive to see somebody, okay, he's doing his concert series there since 2 years, okay, and he's doing 5 concerts a year, and it's one space, and it seems to be a series. Whatever you do there, I think that's very. You have this initiative, and you just do it, and don't wait for the possibilities. Just do it on your own. I think that's very, very good aspect.
Very cool. Christian, thank you so much for these 2 long conversations. One final question. What is the next project that you really look forward to, and where can we hear it?
Very good question. What is the next project? Yeah, okay, let me just think about it. Let me look once in the calendar. I'm too much in the... okay. We have, with Ensemble Recherche, we have quite interesting project at the moment. It's called Urban Sound. It's about gentrification, and we will do a small visit in the east. So it's in Zeitz, it's called. It's a smaller town which at the moment it's near Dresden. So there seems to be a community of artists which live there, and because the rent is very, very low, and so they just occupy a bit this village. Where in the east of Germany there are a lot of villages where at the moment they're really abandoned because the people they don't find any more work. So some artists take their place. It was actually this was the effect 20 years ago in Berlin. Then afterwards it was Dresden. Now Dresden also is coming, or Leipzig is also becoming quite expensive. So they go to smaller villages, and we try to do there a project about urban sounds. This means we try to reflect a bit the history, what happens in this town. And we try to see, okay, what has happened with this effect? What has gentrification to do with new music? I think that's a very, very nice theme. We were talking a lot with architects, with planners of the city, how to build up how to modernize, let us say, an older houses, what to do, what to take care of, that it's just not only the money which counts, how to build structures in towns which will change. And this means also for us as musicians, as artists, because often in this process of gentrification, we are very important because there in these abandoned squares, you find a lot of space. So you integrate there your working space for some years, and then afterwards the whole square will change, it will be modernized, and afterwards you can't afford. So for us as artists, it's very important to take care of these changes. And so we want to go into this with 2 composers and with the research with the ensemble. So I think that's interesting. It's interesting to come a bit away from these just order new pieces, but to build them a context for this. And to build this context and to see also your responsibility as a musician in this world.
Tick, tick, ha, ho, fladon do bom dak doika, do, tick, do, da, tick, ha, ho, fladon do bom dak doika, do, ho. Dum. Fla, dum, pom tak, doi ka, dum, oi dum, pom tak, ta pom tak, pom tak, pom tak,